Okay, there's this dude named Robert Jeffress. He's an evangelical, like very influential evangelical pastor. And he is one of the reasons why Trump was elected. He's a colossal scumbag. And he's a little different than a lot of other evangelicals in that he seems to believe that Donald Trump is actually a really bad person, like at heart. And he didn't support him in 2020, actually, surprisingly. I don't think he spoke on Trump in 2024, as far as I can remember, but he always stands behind the Republicans ultimately, like in the general election. And I'll show you some examples in a minute. But there was this attack recently on a school, again, and Jeffress has an answer for the impotence versus evil problem. He has an answer for why God would allow bad things to happen to good people. Listen to this.
Why would a loving God allow such a tragedy to occur? And then you put in this context children praying in a church, and
Yeah, it was a Catholic school, and the children were in the middle of prayer.
while they were praying, gunman unloads on them. Why does this happen? I thought, Perry, about Luke chapter 13 when a group of people asked Jesus about why God allowed a group of worshipers in the temple to be slaughtered by Pilate. And it's interesting, Jesus never answered the why question.
Because there is no good answer. It makes no sense.
When Job asked why God allowed his 10 children to be killed in a freak windstorm, for his possessions to be taken from him, from his health to be broken, again, God never answered the why question.
Yeah, weird, huh? Almost like it doesn't make any sense. Why would God allow bad things to happen to good people? Either he's not all powerful, meaning he can't stop those bad things from happening, or he's not all good, meaning he doesn't care. Not all powerful or not all good. Impotence versus evil. It's a problem that has existed since forever, since the concept of God has been around. Thomas Aquinas took a crack at it and it was absurd. It's always been absurd. There is no good answer. And Robert Jeffress here is trying to come up with a new creative answer. So what's his answer?
It's not because there's not an answer. God has an answer, but I think he knows that we are incapable of understanding that answer.
Totally. Absolutely. That's it. We're incapable of understanding why God would allow this bad stuff to happen. You're right, actually. On point, as a matter of fact. Let me talk a little bit more about Robert Jeffress. This is Jeffress talking about atheists. This one is a little bit older. This is from 2020, actually, mid-June 2020. And they were, this is in the throes of COVID, right in the middle of it. And Jeffress, as a televangelist kind of guy, packs this arena with people right in the middle of COVID.
Here's the question. There are those that would say that the separation clause of the Constitution would mandate that all public discourse be totally secular.
Who said that? All public discourse be totally secular? I'd never heard that before in my entire life, and I'm pretty prominent in the atheist sphere. What are you talking about? Who would believe this?
Do you believe that the separation clause mandates secular discourse?
What he's referring to is the Establishment Clause. I find it interesting he called it the Separation Clause. The Establishment Clause says government shall, oh my God, I can't remember it. Hang on, let me look it up.
By the way, guys, check out my new shop, owenmorgan.com/shop. I have a bunch of really cool designs on there.
It's the First Amendment. In fact, it's the first sentence of the First Amendment of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, semicolon, or abridging the freedom of speech, of the press, so on and so forth. The Establishment Clause. And when that was put in there, it was designed to basically prevent the government from favoring one religion over another. You want to have religion in government? That's fine, but you have to allow all religion into government. And the idea is they won't want, some extremists like Christian nationalists aren't going to want Islam involved in government, so they're not going to get involved in government either. That was the goal with that amendment. And right-wing nutcases all the way back then tried to do it anyway. So Thomas Jefferson clarified in letters he wrote to Danbury Baptist Church what that meant, the Establishment Clause. It meant the separation of church and state. Now, people like this tend to say there is no separation of church and state in the Constitution. And to that, I respond, just like there are no gun rights in the Constitution. The Constitution never says gun rights. It says Second Amendment rights. The Second Amendment goes through the right to keep and bear arms, but that doesn't say gun rights, does it? It's the same absurd, ridiculous logic. Just like it doesn't say separation of church and state, it also doesn't say gun rights. That's the point. All right, let's keep listening here.
The separation clause mandates secular discourse.
The separation clause or the establishment clause does not mandate secular discourse. It's absurd.
Well, first of all, there is no separation clause. It doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution.
And neither do gun rights.
There's no such thing as a separation of church and state.
No such thing as gun rights. It's fake.
In the Constitution. What the First Amendment says is Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
And as the federal Constitution, that applies to state constitutions as well, which means it goes all the way down the chain. All of government is basically barred from establishing religion or working religion into it. And if that isn't enough for you, the Supreme Court decided on this as soon as Thomas Jefferson got into office. Not only did he clarify this point in his letters to Danbury Baptist Church, but the Supreme Court clarified it on his behalf when he was in office. We're talking within the first 10 years of the Constitution being ratified. 15 years. So this is just a flat-out, bald-faced lie. He's just lying.
Our forefathers came from another country where there was a state-imposed church, where people were forced to worship. They wanted no part of that. They said, we're not going to allow government to establish a state church and coerce people to worship in it. That's all it says.
That's not all it says, and it doesn't matter. The Supreme Court decided on it like really early on, so.
It has nothing to say about Ten Commandment displays in schools, nativity scenes in the public squares, or prayers at the graduation. In 1980, the Supreme Court...
Just to clarify, it does specifically, certainly the Supreme Court decided on this. It does specifically say that you cannot favor one religion over another. So if you put up Ten Commandment statues, then you have to be able to put up like copies of the Quran or just like pages of the Quran or whatever other thing, the Hadiths or whatever.
Stone versus Graham said, you can no longer display the Ten Commandments in a Kentucky school. Can't even display them, much less teach them.
I don't think that's the case, but okay, whatever.
What's interesting, Clark, is 118 years before that, a similar case came before the Supreme Court of whether the Bible could be read in school. And the
Interesting. Then why do we have separation of church and state today?
Supreme Court...
And I'm sorry, and one more thing. You can read the Bible in school. No one is ever stopping you from praying in school or reading the Bible in school or whatever. There was never an issue with that, ever. You can't force others with the force of government to read the Bible or to pray to Jesus or whatever. That's the difference.
School. And the Supreme Court said unanimously, and I'm quoting, why may not the Bible, especially the New Testament, be taught as God's revelation? Where can the principles of morality be so clearly found than the New Testament? Now, that was the Supreme Court 118 years earlier. And every time I'm on...
Let's get an answer to this, actually. Let's see what I can find out here. There is no historical Supreme Court decision, especially not hundreds of years ago, containing that phrase. It's not from any judicial decision. It's attributed to Gene Fowler, who mused rhetorically about the moral clarity of the New Testament. And Gene Fowler was a journalist from from 1890 to 1960 is when he lived. So it looks like in the 30s he made those statements, as far as I can tell. The Supreme Court has decisively ruled school-sponsored Bible reading and prayer unconstitutional, period. That's just what it is. I know he doesn't like that, but that's just how it goes. So he's just like making shit up, of course. Why am I not surprised?
Be taught as God's revelation? Where can the principles of morality be so clearly found than the New Testament? Now,
it's just a lie. He's just lying. I thought lying was like forbidden in the Bible. Doesn't Jesus look down on people lying?
That was the Supreme Court 118 years earlier.
No, it wasn't.
And every time I'm on Fox debating some of these pinheads from the ACLU, I ask them the question.
God, these people clapping their hands into bloody nubs over here, dude.
I say, now tell me, why is it in the mid-1800s you could read and teach the New Testament, but suddenly the Supreme Court decides 118 years later that you can't even post the Ten Commandments?
So you're telling me that you think that the Supreme Court was valid, I don't know, 100 years ago, but it's not valid today? Knock me over with a feather. Also, this dude likes getting really loud. I mean, I can't knock it. I like getting loud. But listen to what he does next. I remember this clip.
What changed? Did the Constitution change and nobody told us about it? Of course not. The Constitution hasn't changed, but what has changed is this. We have allowed the atheists, the secularists, the humanists to hijack our Constitution and pervert it into something our forefathers never
Boy, don't tell him how Thomas Jefferson felt about the Bible.
intended. That's what the problem is. I'm going to say this.
You know, in the 1840s, there's something called the Second Great Awakening, I think is what it was called. And it was this moment of mass religious revival. Like, people started going completely out of their heads on Jesus at the time. And they made all kinds of really terrible decisions that were objectively bad and reversed later as a result. In the late 1700s, when the Constitution was written, they were very opposed to state and church mixing. The 1800s come along and religious nutcases reform everything. And after the Second Great Awakening ended, we got back to normal, halfway normal. And now we're going through what some people say might be a Third Great Awakening. So buckle up for that one.
And it may cost me some book sales.
Yeah, because what you're saying is so hard. No one likes it. No one likes hearing it. Oh, it's so hurtful. He's going to take the book sale hit on our behalf because he's a fighter for us.
And I'm going to say it anyway. Thank God we have a president like Donald J. Trump who understands that.
Anyway, that's Robert Jeffress. So the point here ultimately is he has no idea why God would allow these bad things to happen, but he thinks we're incapable of understanding it. And he also is so thankful that Donald Trump is such a religious man. Dude lives in a delusion, straight up delusion. Tell me what you think in the comments.